The war was over. That's what every screen in the Imperial flagship was saying. That's what every officer in the command deck believed. And that's what the High Commander had just declared, publicly, officially, permanently. "Archive this moment," he said, standing tall at the center of the command platform. His voice echoed with absolute certainty. "Let it be recorded that the human expansion fleet has been neutralized." Applause erupted, not hesitant, not polite, victorious. Massive holographic displays showed the battlefield in slow motion, human vessels breaking apart, drifting lifelessly across the void. Fires burned silently in vacuum. Hull fragments rotated endlessly like forgotten relics. A clean victory, a textbook operation, exactly as predicted. "They lasted longer than expected," one officer commented with a faint smirk. "Adaptable," another replied, "but still primitive." "Primitive species often rely on desperation," a third added. "It makes them inefficient." The commander allowed himself a small smile. "Desperation," he repeated, "is not a strategy." More agreement, more quiet laughter. Then, "Commander!" The word didn't belong in the room. It cut through the celebration like something sharp, not loud, but wrong. The commander didn't turn immediately. His eyes remained on the drifting human wreckage. "What is it?" he asked, almost casually. No answer. That alone was enough to shift the atmosphere. Slowly, conversations began to die down, one by one, voice by voice, until the entire command deck fell into an uneasy silence. "Sensor report," the commander said, this time more direct. The sensor officer stood frozen at his station. His hands hovered above the console, trembling slightly, not from confusion, but from hesitation. "Speak," the commander ordered. The officer swallowed. "I'm detecting additional signals." A few officers exchanged glances. Then someone chuckled lightly. "Residual debris signatures," they said. "Standard after a fleet collapse." "No," the sensor officer replied. The room went still again, not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. There was no uncertainty, no doubt, just quiet, fear. The commander turned now, fully. "What do you mean, no?" The officer hesitated for half a second too long. Then he activated the main display. The battlefield projection flickered, shifted, zoomed out, further, further. And then new points of light appeared. At first just a handful, then dozens, then hundreds. "No," someone whispered. The commander stepped forward slowly, eyes narrowing. "Magnify." The display obeyed. The signals weren't drifting, they weren't fading. They were forming. Perfect geometric formations, precise, deliberate, advancing. "That's impossible," another officer said under his breath. "They must be reinforcements," someone else insisted quickly. "Delayed arrivals, fragmented response." The sensor officer shook his head. "They don't match the previous fleet." "How?" "They're bigger." Silence. "Run classification." "Already running." Seconds passed. Too slow, too heavy. Every second more signals appeared, like stars igniting in a controlled pattern. "They're entering from multiple vectors," the officer added. "Not a single reinforcement line." The commander's voice dropped. "How many?" The officer didn't answer immediately, because the number kept changing, increasing, climbing. "I don't have a stable count yet." That was the moment everything shifted, because Imperial sensors always had a count. "Then give me an estimate," the commander demanded. The officer's hands tightened on the console. "More than the previous fleet." Silence crushed the room. "By how much?" Another pause. Then, "At least 3 times larger." No one spoke. No one moved, because that didn't make sense. It couldn't. "We engaged their primary force," the commander said slowly. "Their communications confirmed full mobilization." "Yes, Commander," the officer replied. "And yet," he didn't finish. He didn't need to, because the truth was forming right in front of them. Expanding, advancing, unstoppable. "Commander," the sensor officer said again. His voice was quieter now, almost hollow. "If these are reinforcements." A long pause followed, long enough for everyone in the room to already understand what was coming, before he even said it. "Then what we just destroyed." The commander's eyes locked onto the growing formation of human ships. Perfect, disciplined, unshaken. Wasn't their main force. Silence. Not confusion. Not denial. Something far worse. Realization. Because for the first time since first contact, the Empire had made a mistake, and not a small one. A catastrophic one. The commander exhaled slowly, eyes still fixed on the screen. Replay the battle. And just like that, victory no longer meant anything. Replay the battle. This time, no one hesitated. The command rippled across the deck instantly. Officers moved, systems responded. The massive holographic display reshaped itself into a full tactical reconstruction of the engagement. Every ship, every trajectory, every second, rebuilt in perfect clarity. The celebration from minutes ago felt distant now, like it belonged to another room, another reality. Full spectrum analysis, the commander added, his voice lower, sharper. I want everything. Heat signatures, comms traffic, tactical decisions, all of it. Yes, Commander. The simulation began. At first it looked exactly as they remembered. Human ships scattered across defensive positions, outnumbered, outgunned, outmatched. Imperial forces advancing in clean, calculated formations. Textbook domination. Pause. The image froze mid-engagement. A cluster of human vessels flickered at the center, damaged, shields failing, hulls fractured. They were already collapsing here, one strategist noted, structural integrity below 40%. And yet they held position, the commander said. Yes. Why? The strategist opened his mouth to answer, closed it, because now the obvious answer didn't feel sufficient anymore. They were delaying, he said finally. That's an observation, the commander replied. Not an explanation. Silence. Continue playback. The simulation resumed. A human frigate broke formation. It didn't retreat, didn't reposition defensively. It accelerated straight into the densest concentration of Imperial ships. Intercept trajectory, the commander ordered. Lines appeared, predictions formed. Collision course, the system confirmed. Suicidal, an officer muttered. But the commander didn't respond. He was watching the timing, the angle, the speed. Pause. The moment froze just before impact. Zoom. The display focused on the human frigate. Hull breaches visible. Engines overheating. No escape vector. No distress signal. The sensor officer added quietly. No attempt to eject. No deviation. The commander's eyes narrowed. Resume. The frigate detonated, but not randomly, not chaotically. The explosion expanded in a controlled pattern, focused, directional. 5 Imperial cruisers were caught in the blast radius. All 5 were disabled instantly. Shockwaves disrupted surrounding formations. For just a few seconds, Imperial advance stalled. The room stayed silent. That was not desperation, the commander said. No, the strategist replied. That was placement. They kept watching. Another segment. Another human unit. This time, a squadron of fighters. They didn't engage directly. They harassed, distracted, pulled Imperial interceptors away from key positions, then vanished, not destroyed, not lost, gone. Where did they go? An officer asked. Unknown, came the reply. Track them. We tried. The commander leaned forward slightly. And? They disappeared from sensor range. That wasn't possible. Not in open space. Continue. The simulation rolled forward. Pattern after pattern began to emerge. Human ships would engage briefly, then withdraw at precise moments. Others would take their place. Damaged vessels stayed longer than they should. Fresh ones appeared exactly when needed. Losses were high, extremely high. But pause. The commander pointed at a timeline overlay. Mark every human sacrifice event. Markers appeared across the battle timeline. Dozens, then hundreds, each one a loss, each one intentional. Overlay delay impact. Another set of data layered in. Time shifts, engagement slowdowns, formation disruptions. The strategist's eyes widened. They're synchronized. How precise? The commander asked. The strategist ran calculations rapidly. Down to seconds. A heavy silence filled the room. Total delay inflicted? The commander pressed. The answer came quickly this time. 47 minutes. Everything stopped. No one spoke, no one moved, because that number, it wasn't random anymore. The commander turned his head slowly toward the sensor officer. The incoming fleet. The officer was already looking at him, already knowing what he was about to ask. Estimated full system entry? A pause. Then, 47 minutes from initial contact. The connection hit like a shockwave. They timed it, someone whispered. No, the commander corrected. His voice had changed now, quieter, sharper. They designed it. The room felt colder. Heavy losses, controlled engagements, precise delays. The strategist muttered, piecing it together. They weren't trying to survive. They weren't trying to win, another added. The commander finished the thought. They were waiting. Silence. Because now the real question wasn't what happened. It was, what were they waiting for? The sensor officer's console beeped again. New data. More signals. Closer now, stronger. Commander, the incoming fleet has increased speed. How much? Enough to arrive exactly on the delay window. No deviation, no randomness. Perfect alignment. The commander stared at the projection, at the destroyed human ships, at the timeline, at the incoming armada, and for the first time, he understood the scale of the mistake. We didn't defeat them, he said slowly. A long pause followed. Then, we executed their plan. No one argued, because every piece now fit. Every sacrifice, every movement, every second. This wasn't a failed defense, it was phase 1, and phase 2 had just arrived. Status update. The commander didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Every officer on the deck was already moving faster than protocol allowed. Multiple human fleets confirmed entering the system, the sensor officer reported. Vectors are irregular. Irregular how? They're not converging into a single assault formation. The main display shifted again. What had once been a clean, predictable battlefield was now chaos. Human ships were arriving from every direction, not scattered, not disorganized, but layered, like overlapping waves. They're forming a multi-axis containment pattern, a strategist said, his tone tightening. Not an attack line. The commander's eyes narrowed. Containment? Yes, Commander. A pause. They're surrounding us. Silence. That wasn't how inferior species fought. They didn't encircle. They didn't control space. They reacted. They panicked. They died. Reform defensive perimeter, the commander ordered. We're attempting to, another officer replied quickly, but their entry points are disrupting our formation grid. Then adapt. We are adapting. A beat. They're adapting faster. That landed hard. Explain. The officer brought up a predictive model. Imperial repositioning vectors appeared. Standard counter-encirclement maneuvers. Then overlaid on top, human responses. Already there. Already aligned. They're predicting our movements before we execute them. That's impossible, someone said immediately. They haven't even fully entered the system yet, another added. And yet, the strategist replied quietly, their formations are adjusting in anticipation. The commander stepped closer to the display, watched as human fleets shifted, subtle changes, precise rotations, micro-adjustments in positioning. No hesitation, no delay. They're not reacting, he said slowly. A pause. They're expecting. Another fleet dropped out of warp, larger than the last, then another and another. Each arrival didn't create chaos, it increased clarity. The pattern became sharper, more defined, more intentional. Total count? The commander asked. The sensor officer hesitated because the number wouldn't stabilize. They keep increasing, Commander. That's not what I asked. I don't have a final number. That had never happened before. Not once. Imperial systems didn't lose track. They didn't fall behind. But now the data stream couldn't keep up. They're staggering their arrival times, the strategist said. Not random, sequenced. For what purpose? The strategist looked at the growing formation. at the way each new fleet filled a gap, reinforced a weakness, completed a structure. To build pressure, the commander felt it too. Not physically, but tactically. The space around them was tightening, closing. "Commander," the sensor officer said again, voice strained now, "we're detecting signal coordination between all human fleets." "How coordinated?" The officer ran the sync analysis, then froze. "Near instantaneous." Silence. "That's not possible across this scale," someone said. "Not for any known species." The commander didn't respond, because he was watching something else. A human formation shifted slightly, just a fraction, but it caused a ripple effect across 3 separate fleet clusters. Perfect alignment, perfect timing. "They're not separate fleets," he said. A pause. "They're one system." That realization hit harder than anything before, because it meant no delays, no miscommunication, no fragmentation. "Commander," another officer said slowly, "if this is their coordinated force—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to, because the implication was clear. This wasn't escalation. This was exposure. "They're showing us more," the strategist whispered. "Not everything," the commander replied. His voice had gone cold. "Just enough." Another alert flashed. "New warp signatures." "Where?" The officer zoomed out. "Farther, past the current engagement zone, past the incoming fleets, further into the outer edge of the system. More signals, larger, slower. Heavy-class vessels," the sensor officer confirmed. "How many?" A pause. "Unknown." The commander stared at the screen. At the layers upon layers of human forces, at the precision, at the scale, and for the first time, he asked a question that had never existed before this moment. "How big is their military?" No one answered, because no one could, and that was the most dangerous answer of all. "Commander," the strategist said quietly, "the first fleet we engaged." He hesitated, reframed it. That wasn't a defense force. The commander didn't look away from the display. "No." A long pause followed. "Then it was a measurement." Another fleet phase locked into position. The containment tightened. Imperial ships adjusted, but every adjustment was already counted. Every movement anticipated. Every option shrinking. "We're losing maneuvering space," an officer reported. "By how much?" "Incrementally. A beat. Constantly." The commander clenched his jaw. "They're not rushing," he said. "They're not overwhelming us with speed." The strategist nodded slowly. "They're controlling the pace." Silence settled again, heavy, unavoidable, because now the pattern was undeniable. Humans weren't reacting to the Empire. The Empire was reacting to them, and that had never happened before. "Prepare all fleets for full engagement," the commander ordered. A risky command, an aggressive one, but necessary, because whatever this was, it wasn't a battle anymore. It was something else, something far more dangerous. And as the first coordinated wave of human ships shifted into perfect alignment, the commander felt it, not fear, not yet, but something close, because deep down, he understood. This wasn't the main force, not yet. This was still just the beginning. Full engagement authorized. The command echoed across every Imperial channel. No hesitation this time, no restraint. Every ship, every weapon, every system activated. If there was still a chance to reclaim control, this was it. Fire. The void lit up. Beams of concentrated energy tore across space. Missile swarms flooded targeting grids. Entire sections of the battlefield ignited in synchronized destruction. This was the Empire's true strength. Overwhelming, precise, unstoppable, or at least it always had been. Direct hits confirmed across multiple human formations. Energy signatures collapsing. We're breaking their front line. For a brief moment, it looked real. Victory, again. But then, "Commander, something's wrong." Of course it was. "What now?" "They're not retreating." The commander frowned. "Of course they're not. Increase pressure." "They're not resisting either." Silence. "What do you mean?" The officer zoomed in. Human ships. weren't maneuvering defensively. They weren't scrambling. They weren't even reacting to incoming fire the way any rational force would. They were holding position, perfectly, taking hits and adjusting, not away from danger, but through it. "They're letting us fire," someone whispered. "No," the strategist said slowly. "They're mapping us." Another volley hit. Entire human squadrons vanished in controlled bursts of light. And still, the formation didn't break, didn't collapse, didn't panic. "They're feeding us data," the commander realized. Every shot, every weapon discharge, every tactical pattern, observed, recorded, learned. "Cease fire," he started. Too late. The shift happened instantly. Human formations moved. Not dramatically, not violently, just one synchronized adjustment, and suddenly, "Commander, our targeting systems malfunction across sectors." "No, not malfunction," the officer's voice cracked. "They're being overridden." The battlefield flipped. Imperial weapons, once locked onto human targets, went dark, then reactivated, facing the opposite direction. "What did they do?" someone shouted. "They didn't hack us. This is too fast." "They predicted us," the strategist said, cold, terrified. "They knew exactly how our systems would respond under pressure." Another human fleet advanced, slower this time, deliberate, confident, no urgency, because there didn't need to be any. "They're inside our decision loop," the commander said quietly, a phrase rarely spoken, almost never experienced. It meant one thing: everything the Empire did was already outdated the moment it happened. "Switch to manual control. Manual override failing. They're not blocking us, they're redirecting us." Another blast erupted, but this time from an Imperial cruiser, straight into another Imperial line. "Friendly fire." "No, it's not." The officer stopped himself because technically the system was still following commands, just not their commands anymore. "They've rewritten our battlefield logic." Panic began to spread. Not chaos, but something worse. The collapse of certainty. "Commander Ray, we're losing formation integrity. Stabilize." "We can't. Every adjustment we make, they counter before we execute." The commander's eyes locked onto the center of the human formation. Something was emerging, slowly, massively. A ship. No, not just a ship, a presence. It dwarfed everything around it, not just in size, but in stillness. It didn't rush forward, didn't fire, didn't react. It simply existed at the center of it all, watching. "What is that?" someone whispered. No one had an answer, because no database, no classification had anything like it. "Target it," the commander ordered. A desperate move, but necessary. If that's their command structure, we take it down. Weapons recalibrated. What systems remained aligned, locked, fired. Everything converged on that single point. A storm of energy unlike anything the battlefield had seen. For a moment, space itself seemed to bend under the force. Impact confirmed. Direct hit. Energy output beyond threshold. Hope, fragile, brief. Then the light faded, and the ship was still there, unmoved, untouched. No visible damage, no defensive flare, nothing. Silence swallowed the command deck. "Impossible," the sensor officer breathed. Then the ship moved, just slightly. A minimal shift in position, barely noticeable, but the effect was immediate. Across the battlefield, Imperial systems shut down, not destroyed, not disabled by force, just turned off, weapons offline, engines stalled, shields flickering, like someone had simply decided they were no longer needed. "What did it just do?" someone whispered. The strategist didn't answer right away, because he was staring at the data, at the control systems, at the complete absence of resistance. "They're not overpowering us," he said slowly. "They're overriding the concept of our control." The commander felt it then. For the first time, not doubt, not confusion, but something undeniable. This wasn't war. This wasn't even domination. This was demonstration. A message, clear, unavoidable. You never had control. The human flagship remained at the center, silent, untouchable. And in that silence, the truth became impossible to ignore. They could have destroyed us already, the strategist said. A long pause followed, then, they're choosing not to. And somehow, that was far more terrifying, because it meant one thing. This wasn't about victory. This was about showing them just how small they really were. No one gave orders anymore, because there was nothing left to command. Across the battlefield, the Imperial fleet drifted in a state no one had ever trained for. Not destruction, not defeat, but suspension, weapons offline, engines unresponsive, control systems active, yet no longer obeying, like the entire fleet had been reduced to observers inside their own machines. "Status," the commander said quietly. It wasn't a demand this time, it was instinct. The sensor officer answered anyway. "Fleet-wide systems are still intact." A pause. "But we no longer have authority over them." Silence. Not shock. That had already passed. This was something colder. "Heavy vessels," the commander asked. "Unresponsive. Defense grids. Redirected. Emergency overrides?" The officer hesitated. "Denied." The word echoed harder than any explosion. Denied. Not broken. Not destroyed. Simply refused. The commander slowly turned his gaze back to the main display. At the center, that ship still remained, still silent, still watching, like everything that had just happened was expected. "Open a channel," the commander said. No one questioned it. There was nothing left to lose. Transmission arrays flickered, struggled, then connected. The screen shifted, and for the first time, a human appeared. No armor, no elaborate uniform, no visible sign of power, just a person, calm, still, ordinary. That was the most unsettling part, because nothing about this situation was ordinary. "This is Admiral Hayes of the Terran Fleet," the man said. His voice carried clearly across the silent command deck. No distortion, no interference, just control. Complete control. The commander stepped forward. Every instinct in his body told him this moment mattered. "You've made your point," he said. No arrogance, no defiance, just truth. Hayes tilted his head slightly. "Have we?" A pause. Short. Measured. "Then you engaged one of our outer defensive groups." The words landed carefully, each one deliberate. The commander felt it immediately. Outer defensive group. Not fleet, not army, not even primary. "You classified it as our main force," Hayes continued. Another pause. "You were incorrect. No emotion, no satisfaction, just a statement. Cold, precise, final." The commander held his gaze. "If that wasn't your main force," he stopped, because finishing that sentence meant accepting it. And yet, he forced himself to say it. "Then what exactly are we facing?" For the first time, there was the slightest shift in Hayes's expression. Not a smile, not pride, something else. Perspective. "You're not facing it," Hayes said. A beat. "You're being introduced to it." Silence filled the command deck. Heavy, unavoidable, because that answer was worse than any threat. "Why?" the commander asked. It came out quieter than he intended. "Why not destroy us?" A long pause followed. Not because Hayes didn't have an answer, but because he was choosing how to give it. "Because destruction is inefficient," he said finally. Another pause. "And because you're not the first to make this mistake." That hit differently. "How many others?" one officer whispered under his breath. Hayes continued. "Your empire operates on predictability. You analyze. You categorize. You dominate." Each word felt like it was being placed under a microscope. "And that works," Hayes admitted. "For species that follow patterns." A slight lean forward, a subtle shift in tone. "But humanity doesn't." The commander's jaw tightened. He already knew that. Now he understood it. "You saw weakness," Hayes continued. "You saw limited numbers. You saw sacrifice as failure." A pause, long enough for the meaning to settle. "But what you actually saw," his voice lowered slightly, "was restraint." Silence. Because now, everything made sense. The first fleet, the losses, the delay, the timing. It wasn't desperation. It wasn't collapse. It was controlled exposure. "You let us win," the commander said. Not a question, a realization. Hayes didn't deny it. "You were allowed to believe that," he replied. Another pause, long enough to commit. The commander exhaled slowly, every piece locked into place. "We walked into it, yes. No hesitation, no softening, just truth." "And now?" the commander asked, because that was all that mattered. "What happens next?" Hayes straightened slightly, and for the first time there was something behind his calm. Not anger, not hatred, something far more dangerous. Certainty. "Now," he said, "you decide what you've learned." A pause. Across the battlefield, human ships remained perfectly still, not advancing, not firing, just waiting. "You can escalate," Hayes continued. "You can rebuild. You can try again." Each option felt smaller than the last. Or, another pause, "you can understand the difference between a test and a war." The channel flickered slightly, then stabilized again. "One more thing," Hayes added. The commander didn't speak, didn't move. He just listened, because now he knew better. "What you saw today," Hayes said, "was not our full response capacity." A final pause, long, deliberate. It was a calibrated reply. The transmission ended, just like that. No threats, no countdown, no final warning, just silence. Across the battlefield, human forces began to withdraw. Not retreat, not flee, withdraw. Organized, controlled, effortless, as if the entire confrontation had already served its purpose. The Imperial fleet remained frozen, untouched, alive, and that was the most terrifying outcome of all, because now they understood something they never had before. They hadn't been spared out of mercy. They had been preserved as an example. The commander stood motionless, staring at the empty space where the human fleet had been. His voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "Document everything." No one questioned it, because history had just changed, and somewhere deep in the silence of that battlefield, one truth echoed louder than any weapon ever could. Humanity didn't win wars. They defined them. And if you're human, subscribe, leave your like, and comment below. Humanity stands.